This is the sermon for September 5th, 2021, Nourished by the Bread of Life. And it's about Jesus in the Gospel of John, talking about the real food. So from John 6:26 through 51, and I'm just reading excerpts. Jesus answered them, "You are looking for me because you ate your fill of the loaves. Do not work for the food that perishes, but for the food that lasts, giving life." They said to him, "Sir, give us this bread always." Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry and never be thirsty. I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate manna in the wilderness. This is the bread that comes down from heaven so that you can eat and be truly alive. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will truly live." Well, a colleague tells this story. She says, "My younger son was about 4 when he came into the kitchen one evening and said he was hungry. I told him I was working on supper and it would be a little longer. 'But I'm really hungry,' he said. Then he opened the pantry, pointed, and said, 'Just open a box.' Don't you sometimes just want to open a box? I do. I've had those just open a box times in my life, and I suspect you have as well. For my friend's son, just opening a box was simply about supper. Today's passage invites us into more than just opening a box. Just open a box is a fast food way of living, which occasionally is needed. Occasionally it's okay, but as a way of life, it can be mechanical and superficial. How does it reflect our spiritual condition? Fast food can be a way of eating with little to no nourishment, and it doesn't nurture life. The American way is to binge on junk food. I know because I used to do that myself. We can eat plenty but live hungry and malnourished lives. Driven by our hunger and emptiness, we just want to be filled up. I've seen it more in other places than in our churches of Davis or Durand. We can be aware of this great need and the unhealthy response in our wider culture. That's what the crowds in today's gospel are after. They want Jesus to just open a box. They ate their fill of the loaves and the fishes. They loved the flash and the miracle. And now they're back wanting to be filled up again. Most TV and also going down rabbit holes on the internet and social media are all about filling up on the flash and the junk food. Some folks who followed Jesus at a distance ate their fill but found they were still hungry. They ate, but they weren't truly nourished. I have to notice, too, that these people did not come close enough to Jesus to be his disciples. Instead, they kept a safe distance. I think that's what Jesus is getting at when he says, "Do not work for the food that only satisfies temporarily, but work for the food that truly nourishes life." Have there been times when you ate your fill at life experience, but you weren't satisfied? Your stomach stopped growling, but you thought, that wasn't very good, and that wasn't what I really wanted. When that has happened, have you ever noticed that that's happened in your life of prayer? When has this happened to us in our families and in our relationships, in our work life, in our day-to-day life, in our search for meaning and purpose? And what else would you add to that list? When you ate but you weren't satisfied, when you wanted the flash and the fun maybe, although fun is a good thing. But in terms of wanting to eat and not being nourished by it, that can happen in any aspect of our lives. Those are all just open a box moments in our lives. They leave something in us and in our relationships starving and malnourished. Our hunger and emptiness are real. Jesus knows that. He also knows that they are about more than filling the stomach. I am the bread of life, Jesus says. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry. Yes, the body needs to be fed and nourished, and so does the soul. And Jesus is equating these at a deeper level. Hunger, in whatever form it takes, and in whatever ways we feel it, is always a spiritual issue. After having the shoulder infection that I had, and then that strange flu that I thought was COVID, although I was very pleased it wasn't COVID, I noticed that my hunger and my eating became disordered. My normal eating pattern was gone, and I wanted to eat comfort foods early and often, as they say. Sometimes I did eat for comfort when I was ill. Sometimes I ate to fill a sadness or a sense of loss. Sometimes I've eaten for emotional reasons, which is never a good idea for me given my history of being very, very overweight. I'm physically more healthy this week, but I am recovering still. And my hunger and my eating mostly has returned to a normal state. Oddly, it was a good wake-up call. It made me more aware of how sometimes we do the best we can, and it's not great for us. I wonder what your deep hunger is today. What's the hunger that eats at your life? What is the emptiness that aches in your life today? What parts of your life might be malnourished or undernourished? What are your relationships starving for? This is a good question. I am nearly always hungry for community. My long-term friends chuckle when I talk about wanting community to be more integrated in my daily life and my weekly life. My Enneagram type loves and longs for intensity in emotions. Experiencing community in substantial ways is something I get, and then I want more of it. Maybe all of you are completely content with your spiritual lives. Maybe you're meeting all of your spiritual hunger, your need for meeting spiritual needs with community. And if that's true, then that is wonderful. Your question then is, how are you giving it away? You ask yourself, if my entire spiritual life is utterly satisfying, then you can ask yourself, how am I giving it away? And maybe I'm alone in needing more than I regularly get in terms of spirituality, prayer life, relationships, and to deepen my discipleship. Awareness of all my hungers, all kinds of hunger, and how I meet those hungers in healthy, appropriate ways. The awareness of what my hunger is and how it's met is key. It's the awareness that's key. How does community help us? I see it in all the activities in Davis and Durand: small groups, community groups, volunteering, worship on Sunday. The hybrid of online and in-person also meets needs. How much are we aware of feeding our hunger with the bread of life? How do we find ways to deepen our own discipleship? This can be foundational, our spiritual life foundation. The rest of what we practice, what we do, is built on the foundation of being disciples of Jesus. And you remember what's at the heart of being a disciple. It's laying your life down for others, like Jesus did. We follow Jesus as he gave up all the self-focus that he had in caring for others. We do have to take care of ourselves too. But it's a choice that we make every day. We can either just open a box or we can eat the bread of life. For me, eating the bread of life that Jesus gives involves two things: mindful awareness and a working knowledge of my own shadow. And what I mean by my shadow self are the parts of me, the parts of my life that I struggle with, the failings, the growing edges, the places that need healing. So this passage today in John 6 is about the bread of life, and it's talking about far more than just communion. Look at some of the other ways Jesus fed and nourished the lives of people. Jesus was present. He listened. He loved. He welcomed and connected with people who were not like him, strangers, foreigners, those with other religions, those with other politics. He listened and he learned from others. Another way this passage is about Jesus is that he told stories about common everyday life, and he helped people find a deeper spiritual meaning. Jesus also offered mercy and forgiveness. That's another way that we are called to eat from the bread of life. Also, Jesus was compassionate. He touched the hurting and broken places in people's lives. He shared a vision for a new community life and a different way of being in the world. He imagined the kingdom, which was people being in community together with Jesus and with one another. Jesus reminded people to not be afraid and to not let their hearts be troubled. Another way that it is truly bread that gives life. Jesus gave hope, and Jesus gave his peace that the world cannot give. Jesus reminded us that we are one bread, one body, and our neighbor's life matters as much as our own, even if that neighbor is around the world. So that's the bread of life that Jesus gives, all of these gifts. And is that the kind of bread that you and I are eating to fulfill our spiritual lives? We can't get it just by opening a box. It isn't instant, and it isn't fast food spiritually. Instead, we have the potential to become the bread of life, to become the bread that Jesus gives us to feed and nourish both ourselves and for others. In Dee's service, Dee Proctor Best, a Durand person, at the end, I said that often we want a checklist for what it is to be a Christian. 4 steps to a spiritual life, 7 steps to be saved. We long for a checklist that we can just mark those things off the list and say, done. And Dee wasn't taken in by that kind of superficial spiritual life. Her faith was more deep and always connected with those around her. Well, we can go more deeply into living our lives with compassion, with all kinds of support. We eat the bread of life. We are nourished by Jesus. We eat the bread of life, we feast at Christ's banqueting table, and we are truly nourished to give ourselves for others. Amen.